And then Bob dropped the bombshell. Clear out your room. When my mother gets discharged from the hospital next month, I'm bringing her straight to this house. Living together might make household chores easier, but I'll have to face my mother-in-law and endure her snide comments every single day. Utter devastation washed over me. Despite his insistence on this plan, arguing with Bob seemed futile. I knew from experience that it was better to take discreet measures. As Bob left, oblivious to my intentions, he appeared quite pleased. Everything's going according to my plan. It's so simple. It's laughable. Hours later, after tidying up and taking a break, my phone rang loudly. It was a frantic call from Bob. Hey, what the heck? The house is empty. I am Catherine Rose, a 45-year-old working mother holding a managerial position at a publishing company. Balancing work and family in this typical American setup was challenging, especially with the societal expectations of the era. When I got married, the idea of women marrying and becoming homemakers was prevalent, but Bob allowed me to work. In return, I gave my all to both my job and household chores. However, the pressure intensified after having kids, with my mother-in-law Mary's disapproval echoing in my ears. When are you going to stop this job nonsense? You're such a terrible wife. Her outdated views clashed with my dedication to both career and home. My children, witnessing my commitment, assisted around the house. My daughter handled laundry and ironing, while my son took care of the bath daily. Despite my busy schedule, I always prepared meals and cleaned up upon returning home. However, Bob never lifted a finger, dismissing my requests for help. Bob's response remained constant. Catherine, I let you keep working, didn't I? Quit playing the victim and trying to make me do the chores. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law would often tattle on me, subjecting me to her criticism. Bob's the breadwinner, and you're trying to make him do house chores. What are you thinking? Despite my gratitude for the opportunity to work, the hostility escalated. Almost every night, my mother-in-law would call with snide remarks, making conversations unbearable. My kids even resorted to pretending they were needed elsewhere to avoid the constant criticism. It was perplexing. Why all this hostility when I've been handling both household chores and raising the kids? She should understand the immense challenge of juggling both roles. What more does she want from me? The stress is overwhelming right now, and the only saving grace is that my kids are on my side. The root cause of this situation lies in Bob's salary. Truth be told, Bob's pay isn't that great. It would be considered on the lower end. He struggled to find a job and eventually landed one at a small company thanks to a family connection. If he had shown some initiative, I wouldn't have cared about the low salary and would have supported him wholeheartedly. But Bob got down on himself because of the way he secured the job. In the beginning, he used to mutter things like, I should have been working at a bigger, more renowned company. He never strived for promotions or explored new job opportunities. Someone truly capable would have studied on the side or honed their skills, but Bob didn't. As a result, he only ever received raises based on seniority, and his performance-based bonuses were always the bare minimum. On the other hand, the company I work for is a nationwide corporation with established parental leave policies. While it felt the effects of the economic bubble, it managed to avoid major salary cuts. I've climbed up to the position of manager, successfully handling numerous contracts and projects, earning considerably more than Bob. I cover our kids' expenses and set aside money for their college funds using my paycheck. Looking back, I realized that during parental leave for my 2 children, I lived off my savings since there was no salary from Bob. There's no record of any transfers from him, and lately, I've been questioning if we've mostly been living on my salary. I checked my bank book for confirmation. Rent, utilities, groceries, and the kids' school fees. I've been paying for everything. Not a single penny has come from Bob's account. I laughed it off, feeling drained, realizing that Bob's salary is spent on his hobbies and giving pocket money to my mother-in-law. I've always thought I'd owed Bob for letting me continue working, putting in extra effort with household chores and childcare. Yet, I cover all the living expenses, while Bob spends his salary freely without saving a dime. In terms of supporting our lives, I am the main breadwinner. If I were to leave with the kids or throw the bank book at him and tell him to leave, what would happen? Would Bob quietly go or stick to his claim of being the main breadwinner? It's a total mystery, and I just can't understand. If I, who's paying for everything, were to leave with the kids, what would happen? Or if I threw this bank book at him and told him to leave, would Bob just quietly go? But sticking to his claim that he's the main breadwinner, he'd probably tattle to my mother-in-law. I wonder if my mother-in-law knows about the difference in our salaries. No, if she knew, she probably wouldn't make those snide remarks. She must think he's a wonderful son supporting his family and even allowing his wife to work. If she knew about the difference in our salaries, what would she think? Would she ditch Bob and cozy up to me? Nah, that's the last thing I'd want. If Bob and I were to part ways, I wonder what would become of him and my mother-in-law. What would they do? Tired of the snide remarks from my mother-in-law, I'd often find myself pondering these thoughts. In the midst of all this, my mother-in-law had an accident at her home, injuring her foot. It appeared that hospitalization and physical therapy would be necessary for a while. Since my father-in-law had passed away before Bob and I got married, my mother-in-law had been living alone. Now, with her in this state, either Bob or I had to take care of her. I received a call from the hospitalized mother-in-law, and the moment I answered, she began with her demands, wanting this and that. I was at work, and every attempt to mention it led to her lashing out. Swamped with work, I decided to let Bob handle her. Dealing with criticism from my mother-in-law for working was a significant stressor, and having Bob visit the hospital to cheer her up seemed like the best solution. When I asked Bob to care for my mother-in-law, he immediately began complaining. "Hey, Catherine, why aren't you looking after Mom? I'm working too, you know." Despite being his mother, he just tossed all the caregiving responsibilities to his wife. Holding back my frustration, I replied, "I have work too, Bob, plus all the chores at home. If you'd help around the house, maybe I could visit her. More importantly, I think your mom would be happier if it was you who came to care for her." This was true. While some might vent their stress by snapping at their daughter-in-law, positive thinking was crucial. So, I kept finding reasons to avoid caring for my mother-in-law. Instead, I neatly washed and folded her laundry, packing it in a bag. If she asked for something specific, I would buy it, even if Bob took credit and I got the blame. I simply didn't want to hear her snide remarks. Fortunately, it seemed my judgment was right. My mother-in-law greeted Bob with a big smile every day. For a mother like her, nothing beat the joy of being cherished by her son. Having her beloved son around must have felt much better than dealing with a daughter-in-law she'd want to make sarcastic comments about every day. It appeared that my mother-in-law eagerly awaited Bob's return from work. Focusing on their conversations, she handed him shopping lists and hadn't called me since the first time she was admitted to the hospital. Observing my mother-in-law's smiles when Bob was around, he probably felt like he was being a good son. Even when he returned home, he was in a good mood, simply handing me laundry and shopping notes without complaints. While Bob threw in some sarcastic remarks when handing over my mother-in-law's things, I could still live peacefully, avoiding her complaints. That's what I murmured to myself in the middle of the night. It would be nice if things could stay peaceful for a while. But my mother-in-law's age and injuries took a toll. Through Bob, I pushed for her rehabilitation, but my mother-in-law, delighted with her son's visits, tended to skip it. By the time her injury healed, her legs had become weak. Bob would visit her in the evening, yet she would skip daytime rehab, eagerly waiting in her room for his visit. After experiencing her son's care, my mother-in-law started making various requests from Bob. She rarely called on me directly, but when it came to tasks like laundry, I was the one who actually did it. Running errands, doing laundry, and even bringing her snacks became a daily routine. All she did was sit in her hospital room and chat cheerfully with her son while I handled the housework. It was a relief not to see my mother-in-law, but I was worn out from her numerous requests. Shopping alone became a significant chore. I understood that hospitals could be boring, but I couldn't fathom why she needed so much stuff. If her legs had become weak, surely living alone would become inconvenient. It seemed my mother-in-law realized this too. Then, she made a shocking request to Bob. Her legs weren't moving well anymore, and shopping and preparing meals had become difficult. "Bob, please don't leave me alone," she pleaded. Of course, Bob sided with my mother-in-law. "Maybe we should live together. It might be easier for Catherine to take care of you." Without consulting me, they were moving in the direction of living together. And then Bob dropped the bombshell on me. "I'm going to be living with my mother starting next month. Clear out your room when she gets out of the hospital. I'll bring her straight here." From the perspective of efficiency in doing household chores, it's certainly easier for my mother-in-law to live with us. As for me, I'll have to face my mother-in-law every day and endure her nagging. My feelings were extremely downcast, but Bob acted like it was already a done deal that we'd all live together. "I understand," I replied with little energy. Bob seemed determined to force this co-living situation, no matter the despair I felt. It might be better to discreetly make plans rather than argue about it now. I knew this from years of experience. While Bob and my mother-in-law happily planned for the move, I constantly thought about how I could escape. I have my own room where I gather and review my work materials. There are many books and files in that room, essential for my work. Bob wants me to give it up. Without this room, my work would be impacted. I might have to come home even later than I do now. I muttered to myself while staring at the bookshelf. Where should I move all these books and documents? I can't leave them at home if we live with my mother-in-law. They're too important to risk getting thrown away or damaged. It may sound like something out of a TV drama, but I really fear she might throw them out, especially since she'll probably target what she knows is important to me. And if I dare complain, she'll feign ignorance and run to Bob for support. She didn't know they were important, Bob. Catherine's mad, even though it was an accident. Help. There will be no peace for me in this house once we start living together. I can see her bossing me around and making snide remarks about my work, wearing me out. What should I do? If my mother-in-law is coming to this house, I had a sudden realization. Why hadn't I thought of this simple solution before? It seems living with my mother-in-law and all her nagging wore me down more than I realized. It felt like the fog before my eyes was gradually clearing up. Well, of course, there's absolutely no need for me to hold back. Why didn't I realize something so simple? I mumbled to myself and immediately began making preparations. As the month changed, the day of my mother-in-law's discharge from the hospital arrived. Bob was all excited, having taken the day off from the start of the morning. "Hey, you better take proper care of my mom from now on. Don't think I'm going to step in like I did when she was in the hospital," he said in a commanding tone. Without responding to Bob's order, I changed the subject. "Oh, speaking of which, your mom's been in the hospital for quite a while, right? Hospital food is bland, and they don't give you much. I bet a gourmet like her wasn't satisfied. I think the discharge process and packing will take up the morning, so why don't you take her out for some good food? You took the day off, after all. How about a nice drive, just the two of you? I think she'd really appreciate it." I handed Bob a generous amount of cash I'd set aside for living expenses and even Bob's personal spending. But this was more than his monthly allowance. Surprised by the unexpected bonus, Bob's spirits lifted even higher. "Well, aren't you thoughtful? All right, I'll use this money and go for a drive with my mom. I'll give you a call when we decide about dinner. Make sure the house is in tip-top shape for my mom." "All right." Without a hint of suspicion, Bob happily left. Everything was going just as I had planned. It was almost too simple. I couldn't help but laugh. This should buy me some time. I'm looking forward to when Bob and my mother-in-law return. With that, I continued tidying up the house. I had to finish cleaning before Bob and my mother-in-law came back. A few hours later, just as I was taking a break after finishing up, my cell phone began ringing loudly. The call came in a flustered tone from Bob. "Hey, what's going on? The house is empty." That's right. After Bob went to pick up my mother-in-law, I moved all our stuff to the new house we just rented. Of course, I left some of Bob's personal belongings and a bed for my mother-in-law in the room. "Oh, you're back already. You told me to clear out the room, so I emptied both the room and the living room for Mom to feel comfortable. From now on, please enjoy your time with her." I responded nonchalantly, which only infuriated Bob. "You've got to be kidding me. The living room and kitchen are totally empty. After all I've done to support this family, how could you?" There it was, his go-to line. He seemed to believe that saying this put him in a superior position. How naive. "No, Bob. I've been the one supporting the family, including you. Weren't you spending your paycheck on pocket money for your mom and your own hobbies? And yet, you demand an allowance from the family budget. How does that make you the breadwinner?" Bob seemed surprised by my resistance, but he retorted nonetheless. His argument, however, was nonsensical. "Shut it. I'm the man here. I'm the head of this household. You, as my wife, should just do as I say. Now put everything back the way it was." "No thanks. I bought all the furniture in the living room and all the kitchenware with my salary. The kids are with me, so don't worry. I also paid for the rent, utilities, and groceries of that house. So, in reality, I'm the breadwinner. Why did you decide to live with your mom without consulting me? I can't live with someone so selfish as you. I wish you can be the provider now. Live your life as you please." It seemed that Bob finally realized my intentions. "Hold on. Are you saying the rent for this place? I've paid up until the end of this month. But for next month, you'll need to handle it. I've also canceled all the automatic payments for electricity, gas, and the internet. So good luck with that." Bob's words probably tipped her off to the situation. My mother-in-law also started making a racket in a loud voice. "How could you, Catherine? Just because you have a job doesn't mean you can act all high and mighty. Fine, Bob, and I will live here in luxury. Oh, does my mother-in-law not know about Bob's earnings? I hope you can have that luxurious life. That is, if your son can afford it. Anyway, goodbye." "Wait, Catherine. Where are you right now?" I didn't bother listening to the rest of Bob's rant. I hung up and blocked both Bob and my mother-in-law's numbers. The rest is probably as you'd imagine. With the meager salary from his uninspiring job at a small company, Bob was left with very little after paying the rent and utilities. Living in a needlessly spacious apartment where a family of 4 once lived, Bob and my mother-in-law would constantly bicker. "What's with this meal? Can't you provide something better for your mother? Shut up. If you want something else, make it yourself. You're just making excuses, saying walking is too hard after slacking off on your rehab. You don't do anything at home. Mom, you're just wasting time." Having neglected her rehab, my mother-in-law's legs had become weak, and she refused to do any home workouts. Could my legs not move as I wanted, causing my frustration? She started imposing unreasonable demands on Bob, whom she had cherished so much. Maybe she's showing early signs of Alzheimer's. Even adding my mother-in-law's pension, it feels like they're living in poverty. They'd be better off if they moved to a smaller place fit for 2. But it seems Bob hasn't thought of that. He probably tried to contact me numerous times, but I've blocked all communication from both Bob and my mother-in-law since that incident. Of course, my kids did the same, blocking their numbers when we moved. Bob doesn't know our new address, and he can't ask for help. Their living situation will probably collapse soon. I was earning a decent income with the help of my children, so I managed to lease a nice apartment. Each of my kids has their own room. I secured a spacious room that doubles as a bedroom and workspace. The rent might be a tad high, but with Bob out of the picture, I'm saving more than enough. My kids, who were tired of being belittled by their father, are now living freely. They've become more helpful around the house, Helping out without being criticized by their father makes chores feel good. They say everywhere. Isn't it normal to praise and thank kids when they help? I'm glad my children haven't become bitter. I was headed back to the apartment where my kids awaited. Later, through a lawyer, I served Bob with divorce papers. I lived on my salary while he spent all of his earnings solely on himself and my mother-in-law. That's a valid reason for divorce in my book. Bob tried to argue against the divorce with various points, but my lawyer cut him off every time. The fact he claimed to be the breadwinner but didn't contribute was labeled as verbal abuse and clear financial abuse. If it went to court, Bob wouldn't stand a chance. I got custody of the kids, naturally. In exchange for not seeking alimony and child support, we agreed on no property division. After all, the savings we had for the kids' college were from my earnings. I couldn't let Bob and my mother-in-law take that. The car was in my name, and our house was rented. I'm grateful we didn't buy a house. Now I can focus on my job without complaints. I want to support my kids in whatever they want to do. With the money saved for college and my future earnings, I should be able to cover their tuition. All right, I'm going to work hard today.